And she said, we're going to have Ann Gaylor and Annie Laurie Gaylor on the show to talk about atheism on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And we asked if they know any other good stories. And they told us about you. So I flew to Chicago. That was the very first time I ever publicly spoke about atheism. It was the very first time I ever...
Wow. On Oprah? Can you freaking imagine? He's on Oprah Winfrey, and that's the first time he ever openly, publicly spoke about atheism. Like, get it right. First time.
Publicly spoke before a hostile audience because Oprah had packed that audience with Bible thumpers.
Oh.
And my heart cannot accept what my mind rejects after serious study.
And so you have decided what? There is no God?
Oprah ain't playing. How a Christian fundamentalist became a leading atheist. The story of Dan Barker. Dan Barker's a friend of mine. I've interviewed him on Myth Vision before. A Dose of Reason. He has a heck of a story, a heck of a book, but let's hear from him. This is a throwback from way back.
Joining me now is a former ordained minister of 17 years who gave up his religion, Dan Barker. Tell me your story, Dan.
I was one of
the ex-reverend, right? The ex-reverend, yes.
I was one of those guys that would walk up to you on the street and tell you about Jesus Christ and would convince you to say the sinner's prayer, would convince you that you were a sinner deserving of damnation, tell you about Jesus' love, read the Bible to you, and pray with people like yourself, with many people. I was an evangelist, and I loved the gospel, the calling of the ministry, and I've changed my mind.
What made you change your mind, Dan?
I used to be a Christian musician, and I used to travel, and I started out as an associate pastor of 3 different churches in California. I was born and raised in Southern California, and I really saw myself as an evangelist, not so much as a local stayed in one place kind of preacher, but as an evangelist who was out winning souls, bringing people into the kingdom.
Like, this guy was a bona fide, real deal evangelist. Okay. I know, I've talked to him. Like, you read his book, this guy's obsessed with saving and winning people's souls. Like, he takes it to a whole nother level.
And so I went on an 8-year cross-country evangelism, thinking, maybe Jesus is going to wait long enough for us to preach one more sermon and bring some more. And we had altar calls, and we preached and sang. And then I started having little kids, and I was driving this little yellow Chevy Nova around the country. All of our stuff was in storage, no income. We didn't charge. We just took love offerings. Why would we need to save money? The world's going to end. Why even care about any of that? And
wow.
Sometimes after the meetings, if they took a love offering, we would open the envelope to see if there's enough cash to get to the next church. We were like, it was that kind of a thing. Really living by faith, not just.
Dude, this guy was something else. The way I couldn't do that, man. I mean, I'm a father of 3 with a wife. Sorry, dude, your Christianity is beyond mine, it seems.
It's having faith, but living by faith, trusting, And I was so excited, and I was so positive, and I would pray, and I would see answers to prayer, and I would see miracles, and I would get goosebumps when I was talking to Jesus and all that.
Okay, I had all that. I'm just saying I can't imagine being on the road and not making sure I knew that I was going to make money. Now, I dealt with that through drug addiction, but not like I'm going to believe in Jesus, therefore I'm going out on a whim, driving around the country. That just was not something I wanted to do.
And in fact, I can still do that right now. As an atheist, I can go back somewhere quiet and speak in tongues, and all those feelings come back. Whoa, and I can feel this kind of parent figure, a peace that passes understanding, and I get goosebumps, and it's a pretty amazing thing. I have atheist friends who think that religious people are just faking it. Well, they're not.
Yeah,
well,
they're not.
Some of them. Some of you in this room...
Yeah, I get what he's saying. Dan's right. This is a human thing.
You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You've had religious experiences, and they're very real. They don't point to anything outside the mind, but they're very powerful things that happen in the brain. And I didn't realize it at the time, but goosebumps
were not evidence of the Holy Spirit. Goosebumps, do you know what? Goosebumps are evidence of evolution because our ancestors were hairier, right? And their fur, their hair, for thermal control, you've seen animals or birds, you know, they fluff up when it's cold, or to look larger to scare off an attacker, right? You've seen animals do that. So our ancestors used that. Well, it's an atavism. It's something we inherited. We don't use it anymore, but it's an evidence that we evolved from ancestors who did fluff up their hair for those reasons. But at the time I thought, no, goosebumps are actually powerful evidence of the Holy Spirit.
That's exactly what I thought too. I was on that gravy train all day.
There's a whole bunch of people who are susceptible and are looking for meaning. I would look over at you for a minute and say, okay, well, excuse me for saying this. I hope you don't think I'm intruding, but you're having some real problems in your life right now, aren't you? How does he know? And you're struggling with a personal relationship right now, aren't you? It's funny and it's embarrassing, but this works. Talk to people like that in these tones of, and well, you know what? I know how you feel because I used to feel that way too. It's like you're a ship without a rudder. And what's the meaning of life? Why are you here? How do you make decisions? What's it all about? Where do you find real peace and happiness? But I was just like that, and I understand. You know what? I found Jesus, and Jesus is the answer. And Jesus changes everything. He'll make you a new creature if you give your life to him. And you'd be surprised how many people agree with that and how few people over those 19 years actually said anything critical. The mindset of fundamentalists is a binary brain. It's either right or wrong, good or evil, black or white, yes or no. Yeah. That's how I thought. And that's how fundamentalists in all religions think. There's no middle ground in their thinking. Yeah. Which might explain why it's hard for you sometimes to talk to people like that, because you feel like you're talking a foreign language. Well, you know what's happening? Most of our lives are lived in the relativistic, situational, counterfactual, or you know what I mean? Most of our lives are in the gray area. And if you use words like that to a fundamentalist, it has to go one way or the other in their brain. It has to go, oh, this is bad, or this is good. Nothing can be half good. I mean, at least in the mind of the way I was at that time. So there was no way back then, as a fundamentalist believer waiting for the second coming of Jesus, there was no way that I was just going to wake up one morning and then go, oh, ha, ha, silly me. There's no God. Oh, how could I have been so stupid? What was I thinking? Because I lived it. I felt it. I believed it. I lived by faith. And the frontal lobe of our brain is the most recently evolved feature of the human primate. And therefore, it is the last thing to finish developing. We don't just come out, we're not just born fully developed. We're developing even through our lives. And it doesn't fully develop until about the mid-20s. The frontal lobe is the part of you that checks, that's got the social moral restraint over your basic animal instincts. The frontal lobe is kind of like you're finally growing up when that thing finally matures, if ever, I guess. And so something felt different in my mind. All of a sudden I started thinking that, hey, there's more to learn here. There's people with different points of view. These ministers that I'm meeting, they're not stupid. They're not bad people, but they have a different theological view from me. And wait a minute. But I have the truth and they don't, but wait a minute, they're nice guys. And so all this stuff was going through my brain, and I think it was all coupled with just growing up and the fact, darn it, that Jesus hadn't come again. It started within me, all of a sudden, this huge hunger to read. I went through this migration, and suddenly after a couple of years of that, I was still preaching and still believing, but my sermons were less hell and more love. My sermons were less about the afterlife and more about living this life. And I was growing up, I guess, and becoming less hard-nosed, absolutistic about you're going to go to hell and if you don't, that kind of thing, into more of just a grown-up, I guess. And thinking all the while that every little move that I made was the last one. I thought, now I finally grown up. Now I know something. Well, I finally learned, I started moving over to this side as a few more years passed. And suddenly I realized, as I was reading more science and more philosophy and starting to reading things, that my definition of God had changed. I remember driving the freeways of Southern California, thinking about all this and praying and thinking about the human brain and thinking about all, and then this little voice in the back of my head was saying, it wasn't this father figure voice, it was this Dan Barker voice back here saying, Dan, admit it, something's wrong. Admit it. Just admit something's wrong with the way you think. You're not this know-it-all. You're not the person who, after centuries of religious division, you're the guy that's got it all figured out. You're the guy that's going to tell the whole world that your theology is the right one. Every denomination.
That it's like, it's all adding up, right? And Dan's touching something very powerful that I think most people who are deep in the weeds of theology, that have exited Christianity, they know so deeply and have hit these walls and saw very wise men completely fracture. They broke away from each other on positions that they interpreted the Bible over. And you realize, like, man, no one has this figured out. Now, if you want to blindly fall into the trust of the church, many Christians do. They prefer that blind, naive, I just accept what they say. But that all builds up slowly as something, even while you're a believer, as a deconstruction or a deconversion. It adds, it helps, I guess, carry you to that conclusion. Eventually, if you ever end up leaving, you'll realize it was those things back here that added up, that helped you to start seeing things.
Of Christians, everyone can open the Bible and prove to you that they have the right interpretation and the others are off in some way, or they're even heretical, right? They can all do that. I could do that. I could open the Bible to you and say, read it with an open mind and an open heart, and you'll see the truth, which is the way I see it. You'll see it the way I see it. But of course they don't. Human beings are not like that. There's all these different interpretations. And I realize that when Paul said in the Bible, God is not the author of confusion, can you think of a single book that's caused more confusion than the Bible? Really, think about it. Everyone thinks they have the right way and they all disagree with each other.
Oh my God.
And I got to this place where I started realizing, well, the prodigal son is a parable, and Adam and Eve are most likely a metaphor, because now from evolution, we know there couldn't have been an Adam and Eve. There just couldn't. It's impossible. So it had to be a metaphor. So if that's true, then maybe even God himself is just one huge figure of speech. Maybe God himself is just a big metaphor, a way for the human race to tell a parable, a story about our existence that gives us meaning in some moral way. And I moved all the way to this edge in my own mind, thinking and reading and still loving my Christian life. And it was weird because I remember driving on those freeways, this voice is saying, Dan, something's wrong. But over here, this voice saying, yeah, but I'm talking to Jesus right now. Don't bother, I'm talking to Jesus. But are you really? What? Yeah, but it feels right. But all religions say that. But are you sure that you're not just talking to yourself? No, and so it's like this eyeball that's looking around the world. Look at those Hindus. Look at those Muslims. Look at those wacky Mormons. Look at those, look at these. And then suddenly that eyeball went like this. And that was weird. I became my own science experiment. It's freaky. It's really a freaky thing when you have the truth and you know it's real and you feel it. And I can still reproduce those feelings right now. I could feel this presence and talk to this being who isn't there. But it was like a humbling thing that happened. It was like, wait a minute. I'm the know-it-all, right? I'm the guy who's got to have this absolute truth, but what do I know? And for me, at least, and I have other atheist friends who were raised religious, they say the same thing. They were brought down a few notches. They were brought off of the arrogant high horse or the narcissistic idea that we are specially chosen, or that a group of people is a chosen people, or that a certain church is the true church, that kind of thinking, which...
Gosh, this is so on point.
Basically, all it does is it creates divisions in our societies. It builds walls. It creates an in-group and an out-group. I got to the clear end edge of this migration, And it was in the summer of 1983. And I realized, you know what? Let's be honest here. There really is no evidence for a God. I became this brand new baby atheist. I read a book by a woman named Annie Laurie Gaylor called Woe to the Women, the Bible Tells Me So. And I thought, wow, the Bible's treatment of women in law. I wrote her a letter and I said, thanks for writing this book. And I told her a little of my story. And she and her mom had started the Freedom from Religion Foundation in the mid-'70s.
Wow.
So they said, well, could you write an article for our newspaper? And I did. I wrote an article for, I think it was June of '84. And then I got a call from a woman in Chicago. I was in California. And she was a producer for a show with a woman who was a host. Her name was Oprah Winfrey. And she said, we're going to have Ann Gaylor and Annie Laurie Gaylor on the show to talk about atheism on Oprah Winfrey's show. And we asked if they know any other good stories. And they told us about you. So I flew to Chicago. That was the very first time I ever publicly spoke about atheism. It was the very first time I ever...
Wow. On Oprah? Can you freaking imagine? He's on Oprah Winfrey, and that's the first time he ever openly, publicly spoke about atheism. Like, get it right. First time.
Publicly spoke before a hostile audience because Oprah had packed that audience with Bible thumpers.
Oh.
And that's the very first time I had knowingly met any other atheists. Knowingly. And so I was scared for all these different reasons.
Say here.
I was always in love with reason and intelligence and truth. I thought Christianity had the truth. I really believed it. I dedicated.
When did you become a Christian? When you were a little boy?
I was raised in the church because at the age of 15, I dedicated my life to Jesus Christ. I accepted a calling of God in my life to be a minister, to be an evangelist. And at that age, I went out and started sharing. I went to Mexico, the mountains and the jungles of Mexico to share my faith for years. Traveled the U.S., standing in parks and street corners and telling people about Jesus' love. But a 15-year-old evangelist, 16, 17, through all...
No, I did in the 3rd grade. I understand.
And
Oprah coming in not liking what is probably trying to be, with Dan.
I haven't really changed. I'm still searching for intelligence and reason and values, and I still love truth. I'm still the same person, the same minister who wants to know what is real and what is true. And I've decided that the evidences for Christianity are not solid evidences. The Bible is an unreliable document, and it is a very uninspiring document, and my heart cannot accept what my mind rejects after serious study.
And so you have decided what? There is no God?
Oprah ain't playing.
Well, I am an atheist now, yes. I do not personally hold a belief in God, which is a definite...
You went from 17 years of being a minister to not believing in God.
Right.
What does that say about you?
That means
Oprah's trying to attack him.
That means I was wrong. I made a mistake. I had a psychological delusion that my culture and my family were presenting to me as truth, which I wholeheartedly accepted.
And what has now made you come to the conclusion that there is no God?
To be an atheist doesn't mean a person concludes there's no God. It means a person has no faith in God. There's no evidence. There's no substantiation for me to say I have a faith in God. There may in fact be a God, but he's doing a good job of hiding himself. If he's there, I would accept him.
And you say, well, all of those...
Damn, can you imagine the audience is getting so worked up there on an Oprah show, right? They're all worked up talking back to him that's pretty nutty.
17 years that you were telling people on the streets and you were such a devout evangelist, you had reason to believe there was a God. What was the reason that you used then?
The reason was my own personal psychological feeling that I was in touch with a higher mind. I prayed every day. I saw supposed answers to prayer. There can be an objective scientific basis for morality outside of the supernatural, outside of religion, based on the value of human life, based on the fact that life is preferable to non-life, making a hierarchy of value systems, which...
So he clearly, before going on the show, has done some studying. There is an awareness before, and this is his first time publicly ever speaking about atheism. That's pretty wild.
Has nothing to do with receiving an edict written in stone from a God. I am free with a rational mind to determine a hierarchy of values which suits me fine and which helps me to protect myself from what I perceive to be evil.
You feel you're better off now, but you've rejected religion in your life?
Well, I'm in control of my own mind now. I'm not receiving orders from some mind that I don't even know what.
Who was in control of it before?
I was living a delusion. I still am a minister. We all minister something to this world. But I did believe at the time that I knew what I was doing. I believed that God's touch was on my life, that I'd received the holy calling, a confirmation. I believed that the Bible spoke to me, that the Holy Spirit ministered to me and gave me direction. I sincerely believed it. And the Bible says, by your fruits ye shall know them. And the fruits of my Christian life had all of those fruits. I sacrificed, I traveled, I gave, I obeyed. I gave it a 110% chance, and it fails the test.
People are getting worked up there, ladies and gentlemen. Worked up. Dan Barker.
You can't win.
This is Dan.
With original sin. It doesn't even matter how intelligent or kind you may have been.
Wow.
You just can't win. It was all over before it began. You were doomed in the fall of man. You can't win. I was dead. I was dead before my life had begun. I was dead because of something my great-great-great-great-grandparents had done. That's no fun. Adam and Eve didn't do any wrong. They were set up all along. They couldn't win. I've been told I must believe on Jesus Christ to be saved. But first, I must admit that I am totally depraved. No way. Before you go pointing that finger of blame, just remember, Eve was framed. She couldn't win.
Damn, Dan. All right, bro. All right.
The kind of God who's so insecure that he needs to send me to hell is the kind of God who'd probably get a big kick out of damning all the Christians as well. You never could tell. It was all over before it began. I was doomed in the fall of man. But as a skeptic, I must insist Adam and Eve didn't really exist. Neither does God then, for that matter. And until the day that old myth is shattered, we cannot win.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Barker, sincerely, I hope that you enjoyed that reaction. He's a treasure trove of information. I might have to interview him again here soon. Sincerely, I appreciate you all watching. You guys are awesome. Be sure to subscribe. Last I checked, it was 92% of you that are watching and didn't subscribe. Check the bell, subscribe, hit that bell so you're notified every time we do another reaction. Like the video, comment what you liked about Dan's video, the reaction. What are your thoughts about this? Engagement is the key, and YouTube loves that. So do so. Until next time, see you then.